national sport of Canada, he would be able to give these students a much needed sense of belongingness, maybe the opportunity to build some connection and camaraderie through sport. And now all of us know, right? The national sport of Canada is, of course, lacrosse. Canada actually has two national sports, hockey and lacrosse. And Russ chose lacrosse. And it's this really cool story about how these students took right to the sport. They literally began building these makeshift fields in the Arctic tundra, getting whatever gear they could find to begin practicing and playing. And it wasn't just the students who took right to this sport. The whole community galvanized behind this team. Kids from all over Calcutta would come to these practices and these games. They'd make signs and shirts and sweatshirts. These community members, many of whom had not had contact in many years, helped to raise money to get the gear the students needed. And moms and dads and aunts and uncles and community elders would come and watch these practices and these games. They would spend quality time with these students, engaging with them in ways that they hadn't been engaged with in years. And it's this really cool story about how this team made it all the way to Toronto to participate in the national championship game. But the bigger story is that once this team was formed, the teen suicide rate, which was once the single highest in the world, it fell to zero. And it stayed at zero for a really long time. And that's the power of what happens when people can come together and connect in the right ways. And while most of your colleagues and collaborators and people that you work alongside are probably not as isolated or as remote as the people living up in Kuglatuck, you'll see from my presentation today, they are the most socially isolated and lonely they've ever been in history, which is creating real problems in many workplaces around the country. So, our big idea with the time we have together today is this. Is to learn how to fully connect each member of your team, unleashing undreamed of levels of engagement, performance, retention, well-being, and overall satisfaction at work. We're actually going to learn what Robin Williams and marbles and a can of olives and the red hot chili peppers and stoplights all have to do with building super connected teams. Now, one of the things that I would like to offer to all of you before the end of our presentation is this tool that we created called the Connection Kit. If you can't make it to the end of our presentation, there's a whole bunch of really cool resources that exist in this Connection Kit. There's a self-audit, there's some activities that you can do with your team, there's a guide to spotlight people who might be feeling disconnected at work. It's a free resource. You can scan that QR code, you can fill out the form, and then you'll get entered into the Connection Kit. So I'll show this again at the end, but for those who might not be able to make it all the way to the finish line with me today, go ahead and make sure you can get access to that now. And I'll share this with Katrina and the team so you guys could have access to this afterwards also. But let's begin here with starting with a quick question of what is workplace connection? To understand connection, we actually need to begin with the definition of loneliness. And loneliness has a very, very interesting definition because loneliness is not defined by the absence of people. It's defined by the absence of connection. We all intuitively know this, right? Because we could be surrounded by people and we can feel incredibly alone. We need more than the mere presence of people in person or online to feel that sense of connectedness. Now, this experience is summed up beautifully by the late, great Robin Williams. He has one of the most heart-wrenching quotes in history. He said, quote, "I used to think the worst thing in life was to die all alone. It isn't. The worst thing in life is to be surrounded by people who make you feel all alone." And that one cuts deep a bit. It's this idea of being around others but feeling invisible. That's the sensation of loneliness. Now, when we think about the sensation of loneliness in the context of work, we define the opposite of that, which is team connection, as the collective pull to be all in. When we talk about connection in the context of work, we think about connection in this way. We think of it as people showing up to meetings without needing any armor, where they're able to share their thoughts and opinions, and instead of having them bounce around the room, they land with the people that they're speaking to. It's this notion that before I even ask somebody for help, I know they've got my back. And it's this feeling that we're not working alongside one another, we're working for one another. It's that intangible pull where I go to work wanting to give the best version of myself because I care about the people around me. That's team connection. And when we think about that dynamic of the relationships that exist within a team, they are very, very important. Which leads us to our second question, which is what's at stake with our companies if we do not connect? If the relationships are shallow, if there's not a lot of trust, if there's friction among those that are collaborating, what does that really do to the bottom line as we think about our business performance? And to answer that question and to go through some statistics, I want to do a quick activity with you. I want to do a little trivia exercise. So the way that our trivia is going to work is I want you to scan that QR code with your phone. So grab your phones, scan that QR code, or you can open up a browser on your phone and you can go to pollev.com/activate, pollev.com/activate. And in a moment, I will advance the next slide. You'll be able to put your name in so we can see who is on top of our leaderboard that we'll be able to reference after the questions. And then whoever wins our trivia activity will get a signed copy of my book, Connectable. So I'll ship out a copy of the book to whoever wins the trivia. There are 6 questions. So scan that QR code or go to pollev.com/activate, put your name in, and then in a moment, I'll trigger our trivia and all of you will be entered in and we'll be able to rock and roll. The way it'll work is I'll show you the question. You'll be able to answer. I'll reveal the correct answer, and then I'll give just a little bit of context on why each of these questions is so important. So it'll take about 10 minutes to go through this activity. So hopefully you're ready. Get your fingers loose. This is gonna be like a fast and a furious trivia activity. And if you've scanned that QR code or gone to pollev.com/activate, you should be ready to roll. So here we go. Question number 1. The most socially disconnected generation on the planet is whom? Is it Gen Z, Millennials, Gen X, or Baby Boomers? The most socially disconnected generation on the planet is whom? Okay. So according to the research, we know that the most socially disconnected generation on the planet is Gen Z. Gen Z are 26-year-olds and younger. In 2019, 79% of Gen Zers said they sometimes or always feel lonely. This is pre-pandemic, and it's the first time in history where the youngest generation had loneliness levels that superseded the oldest. That's never happened before, ever. The reason this is important for all of us is because Gen Z is the generation that is fastest growing into the workforce. They're populating companies around the world at a drastic clip. And sub 80% of them pre-pandemic said they sometimes or always feel lonely. This generation is looking to their employer to be able to build meaningful connection because so many don't have it in their lives, which means that the employer that can create opportunities to connect in meaningful ways at work is going to be an employer of choice for this generation for many years to come. So that gives us our current leaderboard. Lauren is on top, but it is anyone's game. So let's go ahead and jump into question number 2, which is this. Feeling socially disconnected over a 10-year period hurts our health to the tune of smoking how many cigarettes? Is it 10,000, 45,000, 61,000, 72,000, or 88,000? 5 seconds. Feeling socially disconnected over a 10-year period hurts our health to the tune of smoking 72,000 cigarettes, which is mind-blowing. But we know this. We know this from a study called the Harvard Study of Adult Development. It's the longest running study ever conducted to figure out what is the key to a long and happy life. So for 80 years, researchers from Harvard have literally followed more than 2,000 people where they've measured every single variable they can think of that would contribute to a long and healthy life. They looked at how healthy people ate, how much sleep they got, how much they exercised, how educated they were, what they did for work, where they lived. They figured out how much alcohol do they consume. They looked at all of these factors, right? And they figured out in 2011 that the single greatest correlation to a long and healthy life, hands down, bar none, is the quality of your social connection. The better and stronger the connection you have in your life, out of all of the variables that I mentioned, is a better predictor for your health and happiness. The reason being that when someone feels socially disconnected, the part of the brain that registers that response is the same part of the brain that registers physical pain. It's a part of the brain that flashes when you're in fight or flight, when you're under a threat detection system. This means then that if people are coming to work unhappy with the quality of their social connections, then they're literally going through a fight or flight. They're distracted at best, they're debilitated at worst. It is impossible for people to do their best work if they're feeling this way and going through this kind of an experience. So, all this to say, for our health, our happiness, and our ability to show up as the best version of ourselves, connection really matters. So, guest 554, our mystery guest, is on top of the leaderboard. We have 4 more questions. Here we go. Socially disconnected team members are blank times more likely to be disengaged. Are they 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, or 8 times? You have 5 seconds. Socially disconnected team members, according to research from Gallup, shows that they are 7 times more likely to be disengaged, which is a big deal. We know that social connection has a direct correlation to engagement. Disengaged employees make 66% more mistakes. And we know engagement is really important to innovation, to creativity, to performance, to retention, to all of these factors that we care very much about. So if we want to improve engagement, we have to make sure people have a meaningful connection in the workplace. So guest 554 is still on top. We have 2 more questions. It's still anyone's game. So let's go ahead and jump in. Strongly connected team members perform blank percent better. Is it 50, 56, 60, or 64%? Strongly connected team members perform blank percent better. So according to the data team, we know that strongly connected team members perform 56% better. So here's what researchers did. They took teams, they measured how connected they were feeling. They then looked at those teams inside of the same companies doing similar roles, and they found that when team members had strong, meaningful connection, they performed 56 better than those who didn't. So from a pure X's and O's, performance and output standpoint, the quality of your social connections has a direct correlation to our ability to do good work. So guest 554 is still on the board, but Dr. B, Lauren, and Carmela, and Brian and Kim, you guys are still all in it. This is the last question. So good luck to all of you. Here we go. Intent to quit goes up by what percentage when employees are feeling socially disconnected? Is it 110, 183, 241, or 313%? Y'all have 5 seconds. 3, 2, 1. All right, for all the marbles, let's see how y'all do. We know that intent to quit goes up by a whopping 313% when social disconnection is low, which makes sense, right? Let's just think about this. You go to work every day, you feel underappreciated, you don't feel supported, there's friction among your peers, you don't have people you're excited to see, you feel lonely and invisible around those you collaborate with. That's not a place that you want to be spending all of your, normal waking hours. It's a place that is going to be hard to operate in, which means thinking about quitting goes up exponentially. So with all of that said, guest 554, the mystery guest, congratulations. You, my friend, are the winner. So here's what I need you to do. I need you to take a screenshot of your winning score. You can email me at stevenc@syncalex.com, and then I will mail you out a signed copy of my book, Connectable. So congrats to whoever was the champion of our trivia activity. So stevenc@syncalex.com. Go ahead and take a picture of that. Shoot me an email and we'll get you going. So here's the summary. Here's what we know. We know that when people feel socially disconnected in the context of work, we see impacts to recruitment because people are 167% more likely to recommend their employer when connection is high. We see a 56% improvement in overall job performance and output. We see a 75% increase in engagement because people come to work 75% more often when connection is high. And then we see intent to quit go down by 313%. The first 125 pages of my book was dedicated to making a business case for why meaningful connection in the context of work is so important. And I'm fully convinced that you cannot do the best work as a team if connection levels are low. So that leads us to our final question, which is this one. Well, what is the state of connection? If it's so important, how are we doing with it? Well, as you can imagine, we're not doing great. We know that 72% of global workers say they feel socially disconnected every month on the job, where 55% say they feel socially disconnected at work every single week. We know that 69% of employees say they're not satisfied with the opportunities to connect with the people they collaborate around. We know that 90% of people who say they feel socially disconnected at work would not bring it up to a supervisor or a boss. And we know that 3 in 5 people say their leaders specifically are not doing enough to create meaningful connection among the team. So, unfortunately, all this to say, people are not finding company inside their company, which is a problem because work is such fertile ground for meaningful connection to take place. And we're now working in an environment where that's just not happening as often as it once did. The reason being is there are 5 factors. So, this question of what's preventing team connection from flourishing at work, there are 5 reasons. We'll go through them really quick and then we'll dive into the strategies for what we could all do to help combat feelings of social disconnection on the job. So, the first reason why we're seeing this huge increase in feelings of disconnection is due to busyness. The busier we are, the less margin we have to connect with people around us. And I imagine all of you are incredibly busy. And if you just don't have the time, we just aren't able to connect in meaningful ways. The second is many of the exchanges we have in the context of work are transactional in nature. Now, there is a very big difference between communication and connection. Communication, the sharing of information between 2 people, is not connective in and of itself at all, right? Like we're communicating all day long and it's the loneliest people have ever been. Connection is when you do something that makes me feel a certain way, that pulls me closer to you. They're totally different things. Most of our work exchanges are communication. They're transactional. We're solving problems, we're making plans, we're going through our decision-making process. Very rarely are we having moments at work where we're actually connecting with one another. Now, in our strategies, we'll talk all about how to actually build more connection into the flow of work, but distinguishing between those two is really important. The third derailleur, there's this phenomenon that we're all experiencing that's brand new. It's about 15 years old. The phenomenon is called dependency shift. We've never experienced this before as a species. To give us some context around what dependency shift is, I want to share just a really quick example of what this looks like in real life. As you can see from this picture, this is my wife and my 2 daughters. And from our onesies, it's pretty obvious we love Christmas. We love Christmas so much, in fact, that I'm the person in our neighborhood that throws a massive Christmas Eve party every year, where everyone comes to our house and we get to connect with the neighbors, and it's really fun and we have a really good time. Well, 2 years ago, while we were getting ready for this Christmas Eve event, our neighbor Katie, who's a high school student who babysits our girls, came over to help us prepare some of our dishes. I specifically asked Katie if she would be able to open up a can of olives using a manual can opener, rinse them off, and put them on a 7-layer dip that I was making that we were going to serve for our guests. Katie said, absolutely no problem. So I give her the can, I give her the can opener, I divert my attention. I'm doing some other things. I turn back to go get the 7-layer dip with the olives, and Katie's on her phone. Can of olives is sitting on the table, unopened, and I'm thinking, crap. Katie got distracted, right? She's a high school student. She's probably like on TikTok or Snap or whatever high school kids do these days. And I start to walk over to intervene and see what's going on. And I notice that Katie is on YouTube watching a video on how to use a manual can opener. Like she had never used one of those before. And instead of asking me for help to say, Steve, like, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me? She was incredibly resourceful. Like She figured out how to do it. She applied the can opener. She got the olives out, no problem, no human intervention required. And that is the perfect example of what dependency shift is. It's this notion that we now live in a world where we really aren't as reliant on one another as we once were. In the context of work, that's a problem because I can figure everything out on my own using ChatGPT and the learning management system and all the training resources and all the stuff I can find online. I don't need to ask you for help. I don't need guidance. I don't need support. I don't need you to teach me or train me as often as others used to. And that is why we're seeing huge disconnection in the context of work. It's very connective when people can lean on one another, demonstrate, coach, train, support, advise, etc. So that's happening less and less and less just because of how we're now working and living. The last two reasons are because of what's called unaware leadership. Now, if I ask 1,000 leaders, how important is the quality of the relationships on your team? They would all say important. The problem, though, is the extent to which they think it's important, there's a gap. They think it's moderately important, but according to the data, it is critical for team success. And because leaders don't understand just how vital the relationships are, they tend to not invest in doing things that make those relationships better because they're overly busy and they don't think it's as big of a deal as it really is. And the final reason is due to what's called a lack of recognition, meaning that if I go to work every day and I don't feel properly supported or recognized or appreciated from my team, that's going to create a real distance between me and my colleagues. And that's going to prevent me from feeling that sense of connectedness. So we can spend a whole bunch of time diving deep into each of these, but instead I just wanted to get them on your radar, which transitions us into the big question, which is what do we do? So how can we create more meaningful connection through our work? And the response is to be connectable. Being connectable is this idea that we are ready and willing to connect with those around us. When we are teachable, we're ready and willing to be taught. When we're connectable, we're ready and willing to connect with everyone around us. Now, this isn't something that you do, this is something that you are. It's like a mindset, it's a persona, it's a part of your internal operating system. It's a decision that you are going to lean into the connections with the people around you versus just go through all the tactical things you have to do day in and day out. Now, highly connectable leaders and highly connectable professionals, they do three things exceptionally well. We're going to unpack these things as we get into our strategies. But the first thing they do incredibly well is they build trust. They know how to make people feel safe and seen. The second thing they do very well is they get in sync. They're able to make people feel understood. They're on the same page. It is incredibly lonesome when you feel like no one gets it. Like if you're wandering and you're lost and no one really understands. And then finally, they're really good at validating, meaning they make people feel like they matter. Being connectable is rooted in these three activities. So let's go ahead and dive into each. And I'm going to give you two very specific strategies that you can execute on how to build more trust, how to get in sync, and how to validate those around you. So, element number one, this idea of building trust. Trust is this like really amorphous sensation, right? Like, hopefully, we've all experienced trust at some point in some of our relationships. We know when it's there, we know what it feels like, but we tend to not know how it's actually built. The best way that I've heard of an analogy to explain how trust is built comes from Brene Brown. Now, many of you probably know Brene. She's a well-known thought leader in the space of trust and vulnerability. And Brene says that when people think about trust, they tend to think that trust is built in what she calls a prove it moment, meaning that you have to do something worthy enough of my trust. And until you prove yourself worthy, trust will not exist. But the research on trust is actually proving that that is not at all how trust is built. Trust is not built by some big prove it moment. Trust is built with lots of really, really small moments that compound over time. She calls these marble jar moments. And her analogy is beautiful. She says, imagine that you have an empty marble jar between another person. In order for trust to be built, you have to do little thing after little thing after little thing, marble after marble after marble, that eventually compounds into a full jar. This means that trust is quite hard to be built. And as hard as it is to fill that jar, you do one thing to knock that jar over, all those marbles spill out all over the floor, you're back to square one, marble after marble after marble. This means that for trust to be built, we have to be really mindful of what we're doing because everything we're doing is either putting marbles in or taking marbles out of the jars of the people around us. We have to have an awareness and an intentionality if we're going to create more trust in our relationships. Now, the good news is there's a way that we can fast track the pouring of marbles into people's jars. This is like the compound interest of marble jar moments. The compound interest is by using this thing called pro-social behaviors. Pro-social behaviors are these very specific kinds of ways that we treat each other. That when we do these things well, they build lots of trust very quickly. Pro-social behaviors are acts of comforting, sharing, helping, or cooperating that are backed by a general concern for the feelings, welfare, and rights of other people. These are things like asking somebody a meaningful question and then really listening to their response because you care about what they have to say. Or it's things like providing somebody empathy when they've shared something difficult with you, or giving your undivided attention to let that person know that you're totally present, or gifting somebody a state of gratitude where you're able to recognize something that they're doing. These are the kinds of moments that are called pro-social behaviors. And it's the secret to fast tracking feelings of connectedness. Because remember, connection is different than communication. Connection requires me to see you fully. The feeling of loneliness is this idea that I feel seen through. The feeling of belongingness is this sensation where I feel seen as. Like, I feel like you get me, you're here with me, we're present. The master of being able to have pro-social behaviors is Oprah Winfrey. Oprah is a pro-social wizard. She's a guru when it comes to displaying some of these kinds of skills. So here's your assignment. I want you to see if you can figure out these 7 very, very subtle pro-social behaviors that Oprah is going to demonstrate in this next clip. It's about 90 seconds long, so she does these very quickly. They're very hard to spot, but I wanted to see, can you pick out all 7? So that's your assignment. Most people get about 4, so if you get more than that, I'll be really impressed. And let's go ahead and tune in and see how many you can jot down.
Appreciate it. Oprah, this is your first time on the show. Thank you for being here. I don't know, my worry when I woke up this morning is I don't know if I can make it through this interview without crying.
You will.
Because you seem to have an unbelievable gift. Even now, I can feel myself cheering up. When did you first realise you had this power just to make people cry?
I think I was in Baltimore. I used to try, you know, as an interviewer, you wanted that moment.
Right.
Where you could have someone open up, be vulnerable enough to actually have an intimate connection and cry. Now I try not to get people to cry.
Do you really?
Yes.
You withhold your power?
I withhold the powers.
I mean, Reese, you were on Oprah's show in 2005. How quickly did you cry?
Oh, I think it was like 5 minutes.
Really?
Or maybe 3. I definitely cried pretty quick.
Did you really? You just went, you cried?
Yeah, I think she said, I think you love books. And then I just started weeping.
No, I think it was actually about your teacher.
Oh, and then I talked about my teacher.
Because teachers can make you cry.
But you can say, like, even as you say the word book, like little wells come up.
Okay, go on. Give me your best. Give me your best. Unleash the power.
Well, you need some time, you know? It's about having some time. But let me just say for you, Charlotte, Carrie, Max. Once on my show, a father said, every father has a dream for his children.
Oh, shut up.
Every father has a dream for his children, and his deepest regret in life will be if he doesn't fulfill that dream for his children.
Oh, you're a joke?
What is the dream that you hold in your heart for Charlotte? For Charlotte? For Max?
Well, who are you?
For Carrie? What is the dream you hold?
I just want them to feel like this every day. You have to stop.
Okay. All right.
All right, there were 7. They're very, very subtle. Now, this is a masterclass at being able to connect with somebody in a meaningful way, right? She displays these pro-social behaviors very, very elegantly. And literally, I can spend a couple of hours going through all of the kinds of pro-social behaviors. For our purposes, I just wanted you to get a snapshot of what it kind of looks and feels like in real time. So I'm going to go through these 7 things very, very quickly, and then we'll get back on track with some of the other strategies to keep top of mind. The first thing to be aware of, there were no physical barriers between her and the guests. There are these things called blockers. If we sit behind a table, that feels different than if we're just sitting in a circle with nothing in between us. When the flow of energy isn't disrupted, all of a sudden we have just more of a natural feeling of connectedness with one another. I'm sure all of you noticed deep eye contact. I mean, like she's really making sure that her eye contact is on point to let the person know that she's fully focused and listening. Number 3, she leveraged the personal knowledge she had about James. I have no idea how close James Corden and Oprah Winfrey are, but by saying the names of his children, it shows that she cares. Either cares enough to remember the names or cares enough to do her homework or going on the show. When you can weave in the little breadcrumbs of information that you know about people into your questions and conversations, it reminds that person that you know them, you get them, you care about them. Number 4, she physically was leaning towards the people she was talking to. When she was addressing James, she leaned towards him. She turned her body to turn towards Reese. She turned her body back to turn towards James. She was subtly moving towards that person, which gives off a subconscious clue to that other person that, hey, like this, she's ready to listen. She's leaning towards me. Number 5, she's a paraphrase master. At the very beginning, he said, Oprah, you're a firstie. And she says, yep, I'm a firstie. Then he says, you mean to tell me you withhold your powers? And she says, yes, I withhold my powers. She weaves those words back into her statements to let that person know that we're totally in alignment. Like, I hear you. I get it. Next, lots of touch. Now, I do not recommend that you go around to your clients and colleagues and you just start like caressing the faces of people that you know. Like, that is a big no-no, right? I don't think HR would be thrilled that you're face caressing the people around you. But touch is like a really interesting one because when we're in what's called embrace, our brain releases dopamine and serotonin. Those are the brain cocktail juices that make us feel connected to other people. So like high fives, handshakes, pats on the back, a hand on the shoulder when it's appropriate, a hug when it's appropriate, a chest bump. Like I don't know what you guys do at work, but a chest bump when appropriate. All of those kinds of touch will make people feel more connected to you. And then last, but most important, she's fully focused. She is all in on those conversations. And you can just tell by the way that she's showing up that she's giving you her undivided attention. And it's that ability to give your whole focus onto somebody else that makes them feel that sense of connectedness to you. So we can go deep into all of the ways to actually build connection using nonverbals or using pro-social behaviors. But with our time together today, I just want to plant the seed and make that our first strategy of finding ways to perform these kinds of pro-social behaviors is really key. The second strategy to be mindful of is if we are going to create more trust and more connection in the context of work, the best way to do that is to build what's called a social regimen. We tend to have routines and regimens through most of our work days, right? You have a routine and regimen in the morning, you have a routine and regimen at night. Many of you probably have a routine and regimen for when to exercise or when to go do certain things. At work, we need a social regimen in order to make sure we have the time to connect with the people around us. Busyness bulldozes opportunities for connection right out of our workday. So a social regimen might be every Tuesday for 30 minutes, I have coffee with somebody who's a client or who's a colleague at work. Or maybe every Thursday afternoon, I dedicate 15 minutes where I'm just going to go walk around and see how people are doing in the office. Or every, Wednesday at noon, I'm going to try to catch someone who's going to lunch and see if we can share a meal. Building in time into your calendar to do these kinds of connective things. And I have so many clients where we build these social regimens where the team has dedicated time each week, even if it's for 5 to 15 minutes, just to do the kinds of things that we know are connective. It makes a massive difference because if we're going from thing to thing to thing, meeting to meeting to meeting, it's no wonder why people are rubbing shoulders with each other all day long and feeling incredibly lonely and isolated. We have to find ways to actually do the kinds of things that are connective in nature. So that is our first strategy for building trust. Our second strategy is all about this idea of getting in sync. When we're out of sync, it creates distance between people. It's hard to feel connected to someone if I get the sense that like they don't get it. They don't understand me. We're totally off base or off page. And at work, we are out of sync all of the time. And I can prove it to you very, very quickly. So here's what I'm going to ask you to do. I'm going to ask you to grab something to write with and something to write on. So a piece of paper and a pen or a notebook. I just need you to execute a couple of quick activities using a pen or a pencil. I'm going to prove to you that with some very simple instructions, man, we are not going to be in sync and it's going to be fun. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to put 60 seconds on the clock. I'm going to give you 5 very, very simple instructions. I want you to execute those instructions as fast as you can, and then we'll see how many we actually get correct. Here we go. Question number 1, or I should say direction number 1. I want you to just write your name on that piece of paper. Write your name very quickly. I then want you to draw me a tree. So a very quick little sketch of a tree. I want you to scribe me a poem, not like a deep, super thoughtful poem, just like a real quick little poem, a little limerick. I then want you to draw a hexagon inside of a rhombus. And I can see from the camera, I just lost a few of you for hexagon and rhombus, but I want you to draw a hexagon inside of a rhombus. And then I want you to list the top genre of music. So these are your 5 instructions. Write your name, draw me a tree, scribe me a very simple, quick little poem, little limerick, a hexagon inside of a rhombus, and then top genre of music. You have 10 seconds to just quickly execute these tasks, and then we'll see how many of these tasks you got correct. So with that, we have 3, 2, 1. All right, pencils down. So let's see how we did, right? I want you to give yourself 1 point if you wrote your full name in the bottom portion, center of the page. You get 1 point if you drew me a palm tree on the left side of your page. You get 1 point if you wrote me a haiku poem, which is a 5-syllable, 7-syllable, 5-syllable limerick. This is what a hexagon inside of a rhombus looks like. And then obviously the greatest genre of music is 90s rap. So if you chose 90s rap, you get a point for that also. Now, I'm very curious in the chat, if you just want to just quickly just jot down how many points did you get from these very simple instructions, right? These weren't hard, overly complicated things. Lauren got 0. Lauren, come on, really? 2, Brian got 2. Brian, okay, 2's not bad. 3, Katrina, you got 3 of those? Okay, wow, we are, I guess, totally in sync. Ian, yeah, I'm proud that you remembered what a rhombus is too. Oh, awesome. Okay, so you get the point, right? Like, we tend to think we're on the same page even when we're having very simple conversations, and yet we make assumptions all the time. We filter information through our own unique experiences. We tend to not be as in sync as we think we are. So, to close those gaps at work, here's 2 things you can do. The first is you can use a technique called the stoplight. This is a really good technique that leaders can use with their teams. The stoplight is this methodology that was created by this guy. This guy's name is Alan Mulally. And Alan used to be the old CEO of Ford Motor Company. Alan was the first CEO at Ford Motor Company whose last name wasn't Ford, right? So he was brought in during a time when Ford was losing considerable market share. Things were not going well. They brought Alan in to help rewrite the ship. Now he noticed that he would have these meetings with his direct reports to go through all of the updates on what things are occurring, what's happening in the respective departments. And every update that he was getting was glowing. Like things were great. There were no problems. Everybody was killing it. And he knew like this couldn't be true because there were tons of problems and they were losing market share and things weren't working. And yet nobody was alerting him honestly. So he decided that what he was going to do is introduce this thing called the stoplight, where at every meeting, when they would have to provide an update, his reports had to update using a three-colored slide. The first was a green slide where they can talk about all the things that were going well. The second was a yellow slide where they talk about things that are on the radar, potential concerns that they're thoughtful of. And then the third was a red slide, like, here's the things that aren't going well. Here's the fires that I'm trying to put out. Here's the problems. And by creating this structure and then giving people permission to like really talk openly and honestly about what's working and what isn't, he was able to get everybody on the same page. He was able to make sure that they were in alignment and then able to solve each other's problems and divert resources and really start to close the gaps that were in existence. So often when we ask people at work, like, how are you doing? Good. Busy. Where do you need help? I don't. I'm fine. How can I assist you? Like, I'm good. I'm okay. We need to be really thoughtful in how to frame our ability to collect information to know how we can get in sync with the people around us. Because most people are quick to just say, I'm good, I'm fine, I'm just busy, no problems here. But this stoplight approach of getting people to actually share information following that cadence has been really helpful for a lot of the teams that we work with. The second is to do what are called 10-minute informal one-on-one check-ins. 10-minute informal one-on-one check-ins. Here's some data that supports the idea of dedicating 10 minutes once a week to just have a quick check-in conversation with somebody on the team. We know that 73% of those Gen Zers, the 26-year-olds and younger, say that they will resign if they don't receive what they consider regular feedback. We know that 60% of people on the job say that they want feedback on a daily or weekly basis. 65 say they want more feedback than they get today. For those who are able to have these 10-minute one-on-one interactions, they see a 66% improvement in engagement, a 77% improvement in retention. And according to Gallup, in order for employees to feel engaged with their work, the fourth most important requirement is they get reinforcement and feedback. The sixth is they get a sense of coaching and development. And the seventh is they feel like their opinion counts. I have implemented this one-on-one 10-minute informal check-in strategy where either leaders are having these conversations with their directs or people on the team who have close collaborations have these 10-minute sessions once a week. It has been a game changer. Just creating time where we can really make sure we're getting on the same page and moving in the same direction. Which leads us to our final strategy, which is this idea of validation. Validation is all about making people feel like they matter. It's about reinforcing the skills and abilities that they have. And I'll tell you a quick story about the master of validation. And then I'll make sure we have a few minutes left over for some final questions before we wrap. The question that I want to pose to you, it's kind of a tricky question, but it's this. It's what is Jay-Z and Metallica and Adele and the Red Hot Chili Peppers and Eminem and Tom Petty all have in common? Now, these are artists who come from very different genres of music, many of whom have been around for very different timelines, who serve different audiences. And it's not the number of Grammys that they've won or the number of number one hits on the Billboard Top 100. It hasn't been tenure or the number of shows that they've played. The common thread between all of these different artists is they've all worked with this guy. Some of you might know who this is. His name is Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin is a music producer, and he is the most prolific music producer in the history of music, which is really interesting because Rick does not play any instruments. He does not write any lyrics, and he's not a sound engineer. And literally, if you ask Rick, like, what's your like musical competency? Rick would say, like, I'm really bad at music. Like, it's like, I can't play instruments, I don't write songs, and I don't really engineer any of the tracks that I work on. But where Rick excels is he's a unbelievable validator. He's able to get the best out of the artists that he works with because he's able to see things in them that they don't see in themselves. The best example of this comes from the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Now, if any of you remember the Chili Peppers from the 90s, they were like a really funky, kind of grungy band. They were like big energy, a lot of rap music, kind of intense. And they hired Rick when they were building their third album. And while Rick was working with the team, he was reading through Anthony Kiedis, the lead singer's songbook. And there was all these songs and lyrics, and he came across one particular song that he hadn't heard from the band. And he said, Anthony, do you have like a melody to this? And Anthony said, yeah. And he sang Rick this song. And Rick said, oh my God. He said, Anthony, that's beautiful. He goes, how come I haven't heard the band perform this yet? And Anthony said, oh, like, no, Rick, that's not a song. That's just a poem of mine. And Rick said, like, Anthony, that's a really beautiful song, man. Like, you need to go play that and sing it to the band. And Anthony's like, no, no, it's like, it's too soft. It's too sentimental. Like, that's not what we do. And Rick's like, Anthony, that's like your best song. You need to play that for the band. So Anthony sang the band the lyrics to the song. The band loved the song. They put instrumentals to it. And this is that song.
Sometimes I feel like I don't have a partner. Sometimes I feel like my only friend is the city I live in, the city of angel. Lonely as I am, together we cry.
Now, I saw Paul and Brian just belting this song out. It's too bad they were muted because I bet it was a beautiful rendition that they were singing to whoever is around them in their homes. But that song almost wasn't to be. And that song is the biggest song that the band has ever had. It literally took them from a kind of popular rock rap group to being one of the most iconic bands in history. And the song came about because Rick was able to show Anthony that he was sitting on something amazing. He was able to give him that validation. There's something here. You got to share this with the world. And really great connectable leaders and connectable professionals are masters at seeing the things in people that they don't see in themselves, and giving them that validation that, hey, you're good at this. Hey, that's a great idea. Hey, like, I believe in you. The way that we do that within a team setting is there's two quick things I'll introduce, and then I'll turn it over for some questions. But the first is I love this strategy called team crushes. A team crush is where the team gets together either once a week or once a month or once a quarter. And literally 5 to 15 minutes where the team is able to just crush one another. Crush in quotes is this idea that we can call out somebody and admire something that they've recently done. So calling out someone who was recently helpful, or someone who did something impressive, or someone that we appreciate, or someone who makes life easier. Just taking a few minutes where everyone can say, like, I want to crush Michael because, man, Michael, thank you so much for A, B, and C. Or I want to crush Katrina. She did such a good job of coordinating this event, and I'm really happy that she got all of us together. Little moments where people have the space and the time to just recognize each other is really connective, and it makes people feel seen and validated, and it's quite powerful. The next is to introduce what's called an impact lunch. Impact lunch is where the team gets together either in person or virtually. They share a meal from 12 to 12:30, and during that time, the conversation is really focused on the impact that the team and the team members have been able to make. We want to celebrate the successes we're having, and we want to recognize who are the beneficiaries of our labor. And when the team can talk about the impact that they're making on others, that's really bonding and really connective. Feels good to make a difference with others, and we can tend to strengthen our connections by doing that kind of an exercise. So the crush and the lunch are two quick ways that we can make time to validate one another. Which leaves us with our final quote to sum up this third strategy of validation that comes compliments of Maya Angelou. She says, people will forget what you say, people will forget what you do, people will never ever forget the way you made them feel. And we can validate one another and make each other feel fully seen and supported. Man, that is the best stuff on earth, and it's highly connective. So in summary, team, as we get ready to wrap our time together, and I'll turn it over for some questions, here's the 3-step team connection blueprint. First, we need to be really thoughtful of building trust. We need to be mindful of the marbles that we put into people's jars. We need to make sure we get in sync. It's all about making sure that we prove we understand we're on the same page. And then we need to validate. We need to make sure that we show people the light that they possess and validate that they matter. So I know that's a lot. I've been talking for a really long time. I appreciate your energy and attention to hang with me for this long. If you're interested in accessing the connection kit, there's that QR code again. And then Katrina, I'll open it up for any questions with the last few minutes that we have together today.
Thank you so much, Stephen. One of the to kind of piggyback on our last that we just talked about, someone asked, "What are some connection tips for virtual teams or Zooms, possibly?"
So when it comes to activities, there's like a cardinal sin that many of us make when it comes to trying to build more connection. The cardinal sin is we dedicate that time in the form of an icebreaker. Now, icebreakers have their place in the context of learning. It's like a really good way to get people engaged and energized as it relates to a training program. But in the context of work, icebreakers can oftentimes have a negative impact because the team isn't here to do the icebreaker. The team is here to solve this problem or to do this meeting or to make this decision. So, in the context of virtual teams, in the context of work in general, if we're going to do anything, we have to dedicate really specific time just for that thing. So any of the icebreakers that you guys all know as learning professionals, all of those are really great in building connection when it's a standalone activity where the team can say, hey, we're going to spend 20 minutes and we're just going to do insert fun icebreaker activity here. And when people have time to prepare for it, they understand the context of why we're doing it, and we can just take a few minutes just to do that thing. The appetite and the response tends to be overwhelmingly positive versus trying to slip an activity in while we're in the context of doing other work. So that's a quick answer. My favorite activity to do specifically is an activity called photo swap. And basically, one person, typically once a week, will show one picture of significance to the group. It could be of a hobby, a favorite place, it could be of like a favorite memory, it could be of a favorite person. And just by showing the picture and telling a little bit of the story behind it, it's incredibly connective and it doesn't take a lot of time. And most people, when they've had time to think about what picture to share and what to talk about, they're able to do that successfully without a whole lot of anxiety. So that would be one specific activity in the construct of kind of the bigger idea of dedicating time just to do that. It's a great question.
Okay. Another was a minister of loneliness was created in New York a few years ago. Has that helped anything or gained traction? I'm not sure exactly, Lauren. Maybe you can give me a little bit more feedback on that question.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Dr. Ruth is who they assigned to that role, and Dr. Ruth passed. So I'm not sure like how much progress was made with regards to the work she was doing. I know in the UK they have like a dedicated parliament like governmental role that's dedicated just they have a minister of loneliness. So they have like real resources that help to solve that problem. In the US, I know the US Surgeon General has come out to declare what's called a state of emergency. He calls loneliness an epidemic. So there's things happening, but I think we're so far from like real macro levels, kind of systemic change that is going to impact us. We're still scratching the surface on what to do.
Okay. Another I had was, how do you work with groups that are kind of just blah about everything? They're kind of like at their wits' end, and nobody is really charged to do anything. How do you get them reignited and kind of feel the passion of why the groups were started or the workplace, and how can you get them a little bit more lively, so to speak?
Yeah, I mean, I that's such a good question. I would come back to a couple of like tenets. The first tenet is relational. Like, is there something we can do within this community to make sure people have meaningful relationships and connections with one another? Because if they're at least excited to see one another, that might spark into some other engagements. The second is I would focus on impact. Like, what can we do to make sure people feel like what we're doing matters? There's real results. There's an impact to why we're gathering and together. And then the third is I would build in some sort of fun. Like, can we create an environment where people are actually enjoying this experience? And if those three things are present, oftentimes we can get a group a bit more on track.
Okay, so Paul says, I work for a university and I'm so lonely. Lots of people, no connection. I'm not in charge. How can I get connection where there is no buy-in at the top?
Paul, according to the statistics, you are definitely in the majority and not the minority. I think the key is, are you going to be intentional about trying to create those connections in a world where you're just going from thing to thing to thing to thing, right? Like if you're overly busy with tasks and everyone else is overly busy with tasks, can you create those weekly moments where you can dedicate 15 to 20 minutes to have a meaningful exchange with someone? So here's what I would do if I was you. My one of my favorite strategies, Paul, is I've been doing this with a lot of clients with a lot of success. They're called walk and talks. And a walk and talk is literally where we dedicate 10 minutes to physically just go walk and talk about whatever we want. And that little bit of exercise and that one on one time where we're walking and talking, there's like a flow and a comfort. And people tend to like to get out of their, rigmarole of their day to day. And if you can do one walk and talk a week and just choose people around the university um, to go do that with you every once in a while, I bet you that makes a huge difference and people would really appreciate it. So 10-minute walk and talks, schedule them out and see if you can get people to come with you.
And I can concur that, Paul, because when I was at the university working with college students, that was something that I would do. We would walk, and then it became a thing that the student says, "Uh-oh, Miss Hurt is taking them on a walk," so that means something. So that definitely I can relate to that.
But they probably appreciated it, even if it was a bit of a joke, right? They're like, oh, here she comes. And then they're like, I wish I was walking with her right now because
Exactly, it was their time, so to
it
speak.
was
So
their time.
definitely.
Well said.
So, any other questions that I don't see? And if there's any other questions, Stephen, if someone is in an organization that they would like to get more information or possibly have you speak to their group, would you put your contact information so they could follow up with you, or would you like them to use this
Yeah.
sync.com?
So that Steven C at syncalex.com, that is my email. I check my email all the time. You could also find me on LinkedIn, Steven Van Cohen. I'm pretty easy to find. And I love talking about this stuff. So if you have any questions or if you want to explore collaborations or just want to connect, to just connect, I'm all about that too. So feel free to hit me up and I look forward to connecting with hopefully several of you moving forward.
Are there any